The Funeraldi house was quiet except for the ticking of an old clock, one of those heavy, brass ones that seemed to echo time instead of keeping it. Elena sat in the living room, hands clasped, eyes locked on her mother's framed photo on the mantel. Margaret Everly, a woman loved by everyone in town, but known by her daughter as someone far darker. The funeral had ended an hour ago. Friends whispered polite condolences. The priest mumbled comfort, but Elena felt none. Her mother's death didn't feel like an ending. It felt like a door opening. When they buried Margaret, the sky turned gray almost instantly. The wind howled through the cemetery trees as if the ground itself protested her burial. Elena's husband, Daniel, had put an arm around her shoulder, whispering, "It's over now." But Elena knew better. Her mother's presence lingered in the house, in the mirrors in her mind. Their son, Noah, 15, and daughter, Grace, 10, had taken the death differently. Grace kept talking to her grandmother's picture, whispering things when she thought no one was listening. Noah, distant and irritable, spent hours in the attic where Margaret's old boxes were stored, saying he was just curious. That night, after the guests left, Elena finally went up to the attic herself. The air was thick and dry. Moonlight sliced through the wooden slats, landing on a series of carved symbols etched into the beams, patterns she'd never seen before. There was also a wooden box. Inside, a lock of hair tied with red string, a small silver bell, and a handwritten letter addressed to her. "To my daughter," it read, "you will carry the name, even if you reject it. The blood remembers. When the time comes, the bell will call me home." Elena shuddered, her breath catching in her throat. The handwriting was her mother's, bold, deliberate. She wanted to tear it up, but something in her chest ached. She placed the letter back and shut the box, but as she did, she heard the faintest ring. The bell hadn't moved, but the sound was clear. She froze. Downstairs, Grace started screaming. Elena ran, nearly slipping on the stairs, and found her daughter standing by the hallway mirror, pale, trembling. "Mom," Grace whispered, "Grandma says she's not in the ground."
The bell rings. Selena knelt beside Grace, pulling her daughter close. The little girl's body trembled like a leaf in the wind. "Sweetheart, what do you mean?" Elena asked softly, trying to hide the quiver in her own voice. Grace's eyes darted to the hallway mirror, a tall antique piece with an ornate gold frame that once belonged to Margaret. "Grandma said she's close. She said the bell helped her find me." Elena's blood went cold. She looked toward the staircase leading up to the attic, the same place where that strange bell had rung only minutes earlier. "Grace," she said firmly, "you had a bad dream. That's all." But the child shook her head, tears welling. "No, Mom. She said you'd hear her too soon." That night, Elena couldn't sleep. Every shadow in the house felt heavier, every creak louder. She tried to tell herself it was grief, just grief twisting her perception. But at 3:11 a.m., the sound came again. Ring, faint, distant, and impossibly familiar. It wasn't from the attic this time. It came from the hallway outside the children's rooms. Elena sat up instantly, her breath sharp. Daniel stirred beside her. "Elena, what is it? Did you hear that?" she whispered. He rubbed his eyes. Probably the pipes again. But she was already out of bed. The hallway was cold. The nightlight flickered weakly. She reached Grace's door first. The girl was fast asleep, her small hand clutching a stuffed rabbit. Noah's room was next. He wasn't there. Her heart thumped. She found him in the attic, sitting cross-legged in front of the box. The bell lay on the floor before him. "Noah!" she hissed, hurrying to him. "What are you doing up here?" He didn't answer. His face was pale, his eyes unfocused, as though in a trance. "Elena?" Daniel's voice came from the stairs, sleepy and annoyed. Noah blinked suddenly, like waking from a dream. "Mom? I don't know how I got up here." Elena grabbed his arm and pulled him up. "You stay away from this place, you understand?" He nodded weakly, still dazed. Before they left, she picked up the bell. Cold metal burned against her skin, and for a brief second, just a second, she thought she heard her mother's voice whispering her name. The next morning, Elena decided to throw the bell away. She wrapped it in tissue, sealed it in a plastic bag, and dropped it into the garbage bin outside. By afternoon, it was back on the kitchen counter. Daniel swore he hadn't touched it. Neither had the kids. That night, when the clock struck 3:11 again, all four of them heard the ringing.
Voices in the walls. Be the third night. Sleep had become impossible. Every corner of the house whispered. Not loud enough to make out words, but enough to remind Elena that they weren't alone. Daniel insisted it was stress. "You're just tired," he said over breakfast. "We all are. Maybe you're hearing things." But Elena wasn't imagining Grace talking softly to the empty chair at the table or Noah's blank stares whenever the bell chimed in his head. The house felt alive. That afternoon, Elena called her late mother's friend, Mara, who had known Margaret for 40 years. The old woman answered in a raspy voice. "She told me you'd call," Mara said. Elena froze. "What do you mean she told you?" "Before she passed, she said her bloodline wouldn't rest. That something was coming for the keeper. She said it would start with the bell." Elena's throat tightened. "The bell? Child," Mara whispered. "Whatever you do, don't ring it again." That night, the walls began to hum. It started as a low vibration, like a distant engine. Then it grew a faint chorus of whispers threading through the plaster. Noah came running into his mother's room, pale and shaking. "They're saying my name." Elena grabbed him, holding him tight. "Who?" "The voices in the wall. They're telling me to finish something Grandma started." Daniel finally lost patience. He stormed down the hallway, fists clenched. "Enough. This family needs sleep." He yanked a picture off the wall, exposing old wallpaper underneath and something carved into the wood, a ring of strange symbols. It wasn't graffiti. It was the same pattern from the attic beams. Elena stepped closer, feeling her pulse race. The carvings looked burnt, as though seared by heat rather than drawn by hand. "What is this, Daniel?" she whispered. He shook his head. "I don't." Then the power went out. The house fell into absolute darkness. A second later, ring. The bell sounded again, but now it was inside the walls, echoing from every direction. Grace began to cry. Noah covered his ears, shouting, "Make it stop!" Elena stumbled toward the kitchen drawer, fumbling for a flashlight. The beam flickered on, cutting across the room and landed on footprints. Small, wet, bare footprints leading from the back door to the center of the hallway. But the floor was dry. No one had entered. The bell rang once more, louder this time. Then silence. Elena finally dared to whisper, "Mom?" A soft voice answered from behind her, low, cracked, and unmistakably familiar. "You shouldn't have buried me so deep, dear. The ground rejects what's still awake."
Morning light brought no comfort. The family ate in silence, their faces pale and hollow. Eleanor's mind replayed that voice, her mother's voice, whispering from the dark. It hadn't sounded like memory. It had sounded alive. Daniel tried to act normal. He made pancakes, turned on music, even cracked a joke about haunted plumbing. But when Grace refused to eat because Grandma said food makes her sleepy, he stopped pretending. After sending the kids to school, Eleanor climbed into the attic again. The smell was stronger this time, dry dust and something metallic, like blood. She opened the wooden box once more. Beneath the letter was something she hadn't noticed before, a faded photograph. It showed her mother standing in front of an old farmhouse, surrounded by people dressed in black robes. In her hands, Margaret held the same silver bell. Aylana turned the photo over. On the back, written in her mother's handwriting, greater than the circle of the waking. A chill rippled through her. She searched the attic trunk again and found a journal filled with cryptic notes, drawings of circles, diagrams of bodies, Latin prayers, and a recurring phrase, "Through the air, I return." Aylana felt a surge of nausea. Her mother had always been secretive, obsessed with family duty. But she never imagined this. Rituals, symbols, cults. She turned to a page marked with dried wax, greater than. When the bell is rung by blood, the vessel opens. The lineage must continue. One shall host, one shall guide, one shall awaken. The attic light flickered. A faint thump came from behind a stack of boxes. Aylana froze. Slowly, she aimed her phone flashlight toward the noise. In the beam stood Gracie, eyes wide, holding something small and silver. The bell. "Grace, where did you get that?" Alana gasped, her heart pounding. Grace tilted her head. Grandma said you shouldn't be afraid. She said it's yours, not mine. Alana lunged forward and snatched it from her hand, nearly shouting, "You do not touch this again." Grace began to cry, but her tears didn't feel normal. They were cold, slow, as if she didn't understand emotion anymore. Then, softly, she said, "Greater than. She's mad you found the picture." That night, Alana burned the photograph and the journal in the fireplace. The smoke filled the living room, thick and heavy. Daniel watched in silence, his expression caught between worrying and disbelief. "You think this is going to stop it?" he asked quietly. Alana stared into the flames. "It has too." But when the fire died down, something was left behind in the ashes, the photograph, perfectly intact, and the faint sound of a bell ringing inside the chimney.
The host Grace stopped sleeping. At first, Elena thought it was nightmares, grief, maybe stress. But after the fifth night, she realized her daughter wasn't tired at all. Grace would sit upright in bed, eyes open, whispering softly to someone unseen. When Elena asked who she was talking to, the answer was always the same. Greater than Grandma says she's almost ready. Meanwhile, Noah had become withdrawn. He wouldn't go to school, barely ate, and spent hours sketching the symbols they'd found carved into the walls. His drawings covered every page of his notebook, circles, eyes, bells, and the same Latin phrase, Versangi nem apparator through blood, it opens. Elena was breaking. Daniel tried to help, but the distance between them grew with each night of whispering and footsteps in the walls. One evening, as thunder rattled the windows, he finally said it out loud. "Elena, we need to leave this house." She wanted to agree, but she couldn't. Something inside her resisted, a heavy pull in her chest, as though the walls themselves didn't want her to go. Then Grace appeared in the doorway. Her small hands were red, smeared with something dark. Elena ran to her. "Grace, what happened?" The girl looked confused, almost annoyed. "It's not mine," she said calmly. Daniel checked the hallway, streaks of blood led to the basement door. He grabbed a flashlight and went down, the beam slicing through the dark. On the concrete floor, a circle of symbols had been drawn in blood, fresh, glistening, perfect. At the center lay one of Noah's sketchbooks, open to a page showing a bell surrounded by eyes. "Elena," Daniel whispered, "this is insane. We're calling the police." Before he could move, the basement lights flickered on by themselves. The air turned icy. Then a voice, distant and deep, "The vessel is chosen." Grace began to hum upstairs. A tune, soft and familiar. It was the same lullaby Margaret used to sing. Elena bolted up the stairs. Grace stood in the middle of the living room, her eyes rolled slightly upward, humming the song as the bell floated inches above her open palm. Daniel shouted her name, but she didn't flinch. The bell rang once, loud enough to make the walls tremble, and the sound seemed to bend reality. Shadows rippled across the ceiling, forming outlines of figures circling the room. Elena tried to grab her daughter, but an unseen force pushed her back, slamming her into the wall. The air thickened, the clock stopped ticking. Grace's voice changed, deeper now, layered, as if two people spoke through her. She was the keeper. "I am the host." The bell clattered to the ground. Grace collapsed beside it, unconscious. For a moment, the house went still. Then, from the basement, the voices began chanting again, dozens of them.
The awakened Angelina carried Grace to her bed, her heart pounding so hard it hurt. The little girl's skin was cold to the touch, and every few minutes, her lips moved whispering words Elena couldn't understand. Daniel stood in the doorway, face pale. "Elena, what if she don't say it?" She snapped. "She's alive." But deep down, she wasn't sure. Noah appeared behind him, clutching another sketch. "Mom," he said softly, "I think Grandma used to do this. The symbols are like a map. A map to what? To bring someone back." Elena felt sick. She took the sketch. It showed their house, marked with circles and runes at every corner. In the center was the living room labeled the Eye. "Mom," Noah whispered, "it says once the host accepts the heirloom, the gate opens." That word again. Host. Before she could respond, the clock struck 3:11. The bell rang once, not from the attic, not from the walls, but from inside Grace's room. Elena turned. Grace sat up slowly, her eyes completely black. "Mommy," she said, in her normal voice, then smiled, and another voice followed, overlapping hers. "The line is unbroken." Daniel rushed forward, but the door slammed shut in his face, locking itself. "Elena?" he shouted, pounding on the wood. Elena tried to reach for her daughter, but Grace raised her hand. The bell floated up again, glowing faintly red now, spinning in the air. All at once, the symbols Noah had drawn began to burn themselves into the walls, glowing with fiery light. The air filled with whispers, hundreds of them laughing, chanting, crying. Grace stood, her voice calm, almost kind. "She gave me her promise. The body will be mine, but her name will live." Elena screamed, "You're not her. You're not my mother." But the child only tilted her head. A mother is a vessel too. Suddenly, every picture in the house fell at once. Glass shattered. Daniel kicked the door open, grabbed Grace, and tried to pull her close, but she let out a scream so sharp that it threw him across the room. The light bulbs exploded. The bell hit the floor and rolled to Elena's feet. "Through blood, it opens," she whispered, remembering the journal's words. Elena grabbed the bell and without thinking sliced her palm on its sharp edge. Her blood dripped onto the metal, hissing like water on fire. The room fell silent. Grace's eyes flickered for a moment. They were her daughter's again. "Mom," she whispered. Elena pressed the bell against her chest. "If you want me, take me instead." The whispers roared. The air bent inward, like a storm collapsing on itself. Then darkness. When she opened her eyes, the house was quiet again. Grace lay unconscious on the bed. Daniel held her, trembling. But Noah pointed toward the hallway mirror. "Mom," he said in a trembling voice. "Look." Elena turned and saw her mother's reflection smiling back at her. The inheritance ceiling froze before the mirror. Her own reflection blinked, but Margaret's eyes didn't. They stayed open, sharp and full of that familiar, quiet power she had worn in life. Behind her, Daniel whispered, "Elena, what do you see?" She couldn't answer. Her mother's reflection was smiling, lips moving without sound. Noah stepped closer. "She's trying to say something." Elena strained to listen. A faint, rhythmic sound filled the air like breathing coming through the walls. The mirror fogged slightly, and letters began to appear across the glass, one by one. "The blood accepts the name." Then, beneath it, another sentence scratched itself into the surface. "One must stay." Elena's knees weakened. "No," she whispered. "No more." The reflection of Margaret raised a hand, and behind it, something moved, shadows forming a circle, their heads bowed, chanting that same phrase from the journal, "Per sanguinem apparitor." Through blood, it opens. The floor trembled. Lamps flickered. Glass cracked. Grace began to stir, her eyes opening normal this time, terrified. "Mommy, make it stop!" Elena's heart broke. She looked back at the mirror. Margaret's reflection tilted its head. "You're the key, my love. You always were." Daniel grabbed her arm. "We have to leave now." But the front door slammed shut. The locks turned themselves. Every window darkened, as if night had swallowed the world outside. Elena turned to Noah. "Take your sister. Go to the basement. Don't come back until I say." He hesitated, shaking. "Mom, go!" The children ran. The moment they vanished down the stairs, Elena faced the mirror again. Her mother's voice echoed inside her mind, not through the air, but from deep within her skull. "You burned my book. You broke my promise. So now you'll finish it yourself." Elena felt her hand lift on its own. The silver bell floated up beside her, ringing softly, each tone sinking into her bones. Her reflection in the mirror began to shift, Margaret's face merging with hers, feature by feature. She fought back, screaming through clenched teeth, "You can't have me!" The bell rang again, louder. Blood trickled from her palm where the cut had reopened, dripping onto the wooden floor. Each drop hissed and formed a burning rune that spread outward, circling her. Then, silence. Elena stared into the mirror. Margaret was gone. The reflection was just her pale, shaking eyes, hollow. She exhaled a trembling breath until she heard her own voice whisper back from the glass, "One must stay." The mirror cracked. Downstairs, Daniel and the children heard a final chime of the bell, then the sound of shattering glass. They rushed up only to find the living room empty. The mirror hung crooked on the wall, now showing Elena inside it smiling faintly, her hand pressed against the other side of the glass. Grace began to cry. Noah stepped forward, whispering, "Mom?" The reflection nodded slowly.